Hi, this is Mr. Nazarian. Our learning objectives today: I can find the area of a rectangle with fractional side lengths and prove that it is the same as multiplying the side lengths. 5th grade standard, numbers fractions, B for B. Also, I can explain why multiplying a number by a fraction less than 1 will result in a smaller number than the number I started with, and multiplying a number by a fraction greater than 1 will result in a bigger number than the number I started with. 5th grade standards, numbers fractions, B5B. Okay. Two students created garden beds to plant some veggies. Nike made her garden bed a square shape. The length of each side was 1 2/3 yards. What is the area of Nike's garden bed? Jack made his garden bed a rectangular shape with the same area as Nike's garden, but with different dimensions. What could be the dimensions of Jack's garden bed? So there are two different questions that we need to address here. The first is, what is the area of Nike's garden bed? The second question is, what could be the dimensions of Jack's garden bed? So in this first part, we're given the dimensions of Nike's garden, but now we need to figure out what the area is. Once we have figured out that information of what the area of Nike's garden is, then we can use that to solve the second part of the problem, which is what could be the dimensions of Jack's garden bed. So in the first part, we're given the dimensions. We need to figure out the area. In the second part, we're given the area because, remember, Jack's is the same area as Nike, so we'll have his area as well, but then need to figure out the dimensions of his garden. So we start off with Nike's garden because we know what the dimensions of her garden are. There's a square that's 1 2/3 yards long and 1 2/3 yards wide. And as we know, to find the area of a square or any other rectangle, we multiply the length times the width. So that means that we're going to be looking at 1 2/3 times 1 2/3. From working with multiplying fractions, we know that one thing that we can do to make our lives a little bit easier is when we're multiplying mixed numbers, we can change these mixed numbers to improper fractions. So what would 1 2/3 be as a mixed number? It would be 5/3, because if we're talking about thirds, right, this one whole would be 3/3. So we're talking about 3/3 and 2/3, which would be 5/3. So we're looking at 5/3 times 5/3, the length times the width, and that would give us what? So remember, with multiplying fractions, the algorithm, we can just multiply the numerators together, so that's going to give us 25, and then multiply the denominators together, so 3 times 3 is going to give us 9, so 25/9. So that is the area of Nike's garden, but to make it a little bit more clear and easy to understand of what that means, what this area is, we're going to change this improper fraction back to a mixed number. So the mixed number that would be equivalent to 25/9 is, and remember that with fractions it's the same thing here as the numerator divided by the denominator, right? So it's like 25 divided by 9. So how many times does 9 go into 25? Well, I know my multiples of 9. The second multiple of 9 is 18. The third multiple is 27. 27 is too many, so it can't be 3, so it's going to be 2. And so that would be 18, right? So because 9/9, that'd be 1. 18/9 would be 2. So, and then the difference between 25 and 18 would be 7. So it'd be the same as 2 7/9. So that would be, the area would be 2 7/9 yards, right? Because those are the dimensions, squared, because we're talking about area. Okay, so now we've solved. So let's go back here. So we've solved this first part of the question, which was 2 7/9 yards. yards squared. That was the first part. What is the area of Nike's garden bed? Now we're going to use that information to solve the second part. So remember, Jack's is the same area, and we need to figure out the dimensions. So we know that the area of Jack's garden is also going to be 2 7/9 yards squared. And since we know that the formula for finding the area of a rectangle is area equals length times width, and we know that the area is 2 7/9, that means that we have 2 7/9 equals something times something, right? So all we need to do is plug in two different factors here that when multiplied together give us 2 7/9. Now, so here's his. And so we know that Jack's garden is going to be 2 7/9 yards squared for the area. We just need a number here and a number here that when multiplied together will give us that product. So something I know about the identity property is that any number times 1 you'll get a product of itself, right? So that means that I know that 2 7/9 times 1 would be 2 7/9. So that could be whoops. I'm just going to leave that like that. So 2 7/9 long times 1 yard wide. Okay, so that'll give us, that's one option, because remember it says what could it be? Are there other possibilities? There definitely are. There are several different dimensions that we could get to get this area, but this is one of those possibilities. So we just found the answer to the second part, which again, one of the options could be 1 yard by 2, and sorry about the sloppiness, but 2 7/9 yards. Okay. So the second part of this lesson is finding the value of a variable. And so a variable is usually represented by a letter, and the reason it's called a variable is it varies what the value of that letter is depending on the equation. Maybe, and I'm using n, but it could be anything. It could be r or y or whatever. So maybe n sometimes equals 3 and sometimes it equals -15. And it all depends on the equation and the relationship of the other numbers that it's operating with. So for this one, we're going to find the value of n. So 4 times n is less than 4, but greater than 0. So what that looks like as a mathematical expression is going to look like this. We're saying that 4 times n is going to be less than 4, but greater than 0. So what we really want to do here is we're going to kind of separate this variable here, because we know that if I have 4 times 0, that's going to give me 0, right? And so that I know that, well, I can't have it be, n can't be 0, right? Because then that would make this 4 times n, that would make that 0. And 0 is not greater than 0. So in order to get something inside of here, to get 4 times something which is greater than 0, means that that n has to be more than 0. But if I did 4 times 1, that's going to give me 4. So I can't have n equal 1 either. It's going to have to be less than 1. So what I know is that n has to be greater than 0, but it has to also be less than 1. So what kind of a number can n be? What kind of a number is less than 0 but more than 1? What kind of a number? So fractions, regular fractions I should say, regular fractions are greater than 0 and less than 1. So let's look at some of these examples here. So, is 1/2 a regular fraction? And a regular fraction meaning that the numerator is smaller than the denominator. Yes, regular fractions are less than 1, so 1/2 is a regular fraction. So 4 times 1/2 would equal what? What's 1/2 of 4? It's 2. Okay, and if n was 1/2, 4 times 1/2, that would make this 2. Is 2 more than 0 and less than 4? Yes, so that's a check. That one works. Okay, 4 times, what if the n was 3/4? Well, it says 3/4 a regular fraction. Numerator smaller than denominator. Check. Yes. So 4 times 3/4, and we can just multiply this across, right, by saying 4 is the same as 4 over 1, right? 4 times 3 is 12. 1 times 4 is 4, right? And 12, and so 12/4 is the same as, was 12 divided by 4? 3. So is 3 less than 4? Yes, it is. Is 3 more than 0? Yes, it is. So does 3/4 work? Could that be n also? Check. That would work. Then let's look at this. So 5/4. Is 5/4 a regular fraction? No, 5/4. Let's see. The numerator is bigger than the denominator, which means it is an improper fraction. So it should not work, but let's check to see. So again, if we know that 4 is the same as 4 over 1. I'm not even going to draw that there. I just know it. So 4 times 5 would be 20. 1 times 4 would be 4. And 20 divided by 4, 5. So is 5, so if we plugged in 5/4 for n, is 5 more than 0? Yes. Is 5 less than 4? No. So that would not work. That would not work. So for this one, we know that it would have to be a regular fraction, because any time that you multiply a number by a regular fraction, your product is going to be smaller than your factor that you started off with, right? So we're starting off with 4. We multiply it by 1/2, it gets smaller, right? 2 smaller. If we multiply it by 3/4, it got smaller. Anytime that we multiply a number by a regular fraction, meaning the numerator is smaller than the denominator, anytime we multiply a number by a regular fraction, the product will be smaller than that original factor. Okay, than the number that you started with. All right, so I hope all that makes sense. I know this was a really long lesson. I appreciate your patience, and we will work on these tomorrow in school. All right, take care, guys.